Well, good afternoon. Am I mic'd up so you can hear? Am I mic'd up out here? Oh, this is going to be a good day. Well, thank you. That was very kind. I in fact have been looking forward to coming back here for about a year. I was here last year. Jim and I talked about this, and I said I'd be delighted to, but what am I going to talk about? He said, anything you want. Well, that's open. He narrowed it to leadership. Well, that's still pretty open. So I'm going to try today to cover a couple of ideas. I'm going to try to get some brain cells cooking here and see if we can come up with some solutions to what I think may be potential problems out there. Kind of picks up on this notion of what does a chief want? And the reason I ask that question is because as I do consulting, I often talk to the command structure and say the most important thing you can do is convey your intent. I commanded an organization one time of a little under 10,000 people, and I was doing an interview for a magazine. And they asked all the usual nonsensical questions, and one of them wasn't nonsensical, but they said, what keeps you up at night? The war had just started, so I knew that they were after me to say some big national defense issue. I said, in the crisis that we're in, the thing that keeps me up at night, literally, I wake up and worry that the last PFC in the last fighting hole on the furthest flank knows what my intent is, simply what my intent is. So I toyed with the idea of coming here and talking about intent today. But I'm going to pass over that and make it part of this, but I'm going to take this thing in just a little bit different direction. I've been speaking publicly for 10 years without the uniform and saying the same thing. That until we take out the schools and the training camps, most of them in the Middle East, that we have end of the school plus 75 years of war on terror. Because those schools teach to hate us, the infidels. They start at 4 or 5 years old. So until that little kid that went into that training school this morning, until he reaches the end of his natural life, or somebody helps him, until that occurs, he's a danger. 75 years. So you are the warriors here in the homeland. Your sons and daughters and your grandchildren will still be fighting the battle that we think is almost over. I oftentimes have civilians ask me, how much longer will this war take? It's really inconvenient. Longer than any of us will live. That's how long. I'll just put a couple facts out here that we'll build on as I go through this thing. But do you know that only about 50% of those who come across the southern, illegally come across the southern border are actually Mexican? Half of them are not. Well, that just begs the question, who are they? Well, they're Central or South Americans for sure, but what I'm going to tell you was classified, and the current numbers are classified, but I'm going to give you 2006 numbers, 10-year-old numbers. 10,000 trained members of Hezbollah were mustered on the southern border. 10,000. Divide that, I'm a Marine, I can't do that high math. But divide that out. How many went into each state? How many went into each community? How many of those are now bus drivers, cab drivers, truck drivers, store owners? 10,000 of them in 2006. Do you think the spigot shut off in 2007? No. Went the other way. Went the other way. We know roughly a third of all those who come illegally into the country come in from countries that oppose us. Countries that oppose us. I heard Director Comey speak 3 or 4 days ago to Congress, and he gave a similar prediction. He said in the next 2 to 5 years that we would see an event that would cast a darker shadow than 9/11. Is anybody surprised? I'm not. I'm not at all. I've predicted it for a long time, and I'll stand right here and tell you that it won't be in an airplane and it won't be a tall building. They tried that, it worked. They'll try other things that will inflict injury on our economy. The sad thing is that we've got a whole population out there who says, when will this be over? It's really inconvenient. Which makes your jobs so much harder. So, with those delightful thoughts on the table, I'd like to present some thoughts on how we go about training, what the basis of that training is, but in particular for this very complex task of battle on our streets. The battle on the streets. This training is really going to have to take place from the heart out, and I'm going to explain why that is. And it's probably true and probably always has been, but I think right now, more than ever, we're going to have to go inside each individual warrior that's out there, and it's going to have to be from the caring heart out. Make absolutely no mistake, this war on terror is here and it's in our streets. The way in which we're going to fight this war on our soil, that you're going to fight it because you're the warriors in the homeland. The rest of us support you. But you're going to fight that very much like the special operations folks in the military have learned to fight. We've made some changes to how we go about fighting. Many of you come from that community as SEALs or Rangers, Green Berets, Marines. You've been there and you've done that, and some of what I'm going to talk about today will ring true with you, although you may have done it so many times, so quickly and so easily, that it's habit, but it's not habit to all of us. So I'm going to endeavor to lay down or to define the problem and then lay down an example of how it was used successfully, and then I'll try to address some of the things we ought to be doing here in the future to get to it. Now, on the drive here today, my very gracious wife counseled me, as she often does. And she said, I hope that you've written this thing well. Jim is a friend. We've got to make sure you come through for him. She said, remember to open with a dynamic statement of intrigue. Get their attention. And close with a memorable statement of fact. And she said, Mark, for God's sakes, keep the two as close together as possible. I will try to do that. So at the risk of rigorous approval, I'll tell you that I will not take my full allocation of time, but at the end of this, I will leave enough time where we can have some questions and answers or comments or set me on fire and throw me out, whatever comes to your mind. Tactical leadership, and that's where we're going to go, tactical leadership in your world is focused on a 100-yard circle. This is right down to the gut punch zone. Oftentimes, the actual leadership on a special operations team will pass. Yes, you have the leader, the team leader, but during the breaching operation, there's somebody there that knows that operation better maybe than me. Once you're through that, it may become an EOD operation. The EOD team leader has to be able to take over quickly and seamlessly. I had a joke all written up, and then I decided, wow, that really made me look bad. But I was the commanding general for the joint combined, all U.S. forces, all Allied forces in the Middle East. And at that time, we were doing a variety of things. Can you imagine if I would have gone out and said, I'm going to be the EOD team leader today? Not good. Not good results. So we're going to decide here, we're going to talk a little bit about how we take the agencies that come in, and who knows what agencies are coming in, what departments are there, how you get to the scene, to the site, who's in charge when. And I know you've already got those by agreement, and we all know the FBI is always in charge of everything forevermore. But in reality, what really happens? Leaders are those with the knowledge and the talent, not the title. That's my point. So it can be Commander so-and-so or Lieutenant so-and-so, or it can be Patrolman so-and-so. If he's got the talent, you've got to pass the mantle to him quickly. Now, if you will please let me digress for a short story, but of major historical impact. This will demonstrate the fluid leadership of the tactical environment. This is not my firsthand, but close to it and close enough to know the inside story. The place is MACV headquarters, Saigon, Republic of Vietnam, 1975. And for those of you who remember that, we were in the last days of our war in Vietnam. The NVA had marched south, North Vietnamese Army had marched south. They were right on the outskirts of town. We could see them, we could hear them, we knew where they were at. The RVN troops were abandoning their post. They were throwing their rifles away, they were burning their uniforms, they were hiding in the fields as farmers. They were gone. There was no more defense out there, no more help from them. The U.S. still had thousands of people that still had to be gotten out of the country. Some were part of the embassy, some were U.S. employees of U.S. companies. We also have agreements with other companies that, yes, in an evacuation, we'll go get all British subjects. So we knew there were about 3,000 people that had to be moved out. The city streets were just jammed with buses, bikes, people broken down, goats, everything in the world except military vehicles. Nothing was moving. The evacuation plans in place put there on high were useless because they all relied on an open street. You put a few police cars with lights on, everybody would get out of the way, and the buses can drive to the evacuation point. It just wasn't working out that way. They had to have a new plan, and they had to have it written, thought, devised, codified to some extent, passed out to those that needed it, comment only where it was helpful, and get on with the plan. Colonel Al Gray, who was later to become Commandant to the Marine Corps, stepped up, took charge. Colonel Gray was second to Major General Smith, who was a senior military officer in the country, but at least willing to listen and hear some ideas. The ambassador was still in his office in Saigon, and as you probably understand, if the ambassador is still on the ground in the country, it's his country. And no matter what the military thinks of that, he's in charge. There's such a love relationship with the State Department. They're very difficult people to work for, and we're going to talk just a little bit about why that was. But he was still directing all matters in Vietnam. So now you have this very bureaucratic model at the embassy. This is a model that relies on consensus and limited authority. They're on the phone for every decision back to Washington, D.C. Mother, may I? Very, very difficult when you're trying to throw ideas up there to develop a plan. So the bottom line is we had this very lethargic, indecisive, pensive system that was supporting this very fast, dynamic evolving evacuation plan. Subservient to the embassy is the military, and of course, I'll throw a mud ball at us. We're operating on the very strict authority, top-down, who's prepared to take charge and execute as we have the plan written. Not a lot of flexibility in there. Do it as we have it, but we'll make it happen. Colonel Gray was a pretty sharp guy. He was on the very front end of joint special operations. Colonel Gray said neither body could independently affect the evacuation, and certainly the two together would just bump and bruise each other to death, and we'd never get anybody out of the country. So he called in a few of his best and brightest in this joint command, and he organized a cell, strongest officers, all services, and civilians. He gave them 3 missions. 1, I need you to evacuate all the qualified people and retain control of all the POW information. And I'll tell a little bit more about that because it's just interesting. And I want you to be able to destroy the cache, C-A-S-C-H-E, of cache, C-A-S-H, that the embassy had positioned in 3 locations. More money than Elkhart would have in 10 years. It was all packed tightly in bundles in Connex boxes and stored in these 3 locations. Too big to fall in enemy hands because it could actually impact the U.S. economy, and too big to get on the airplanes to get out. There was a young Marine captain. He's a prior enlisted guy, had a lot of enlisted time, spent most of his career in the reconnaissance business. He was used to working alone. He was used to taking charge. Colonel Gray said, "You got it. You're going to lead this thing." Rank wasn't the question. It was capability. He was designated as a team leader, and Captain Wood quickly pulled the talent from all services in the headquarters, and he built this dynamic plan of action. There were civilians, military, nobody in that group during this operation ever challenged the whole rank issue. It just didn't matter. It's who had the talent, and if you knew and trusted they had the talent, you trusted them, they took the leadership. Unfortunately, the ambassador wasn't included in planning. Sinking boat needs no anchor. The last thing we needed is to have the ambassador want to know every detail and call Washington and say, "What do you think about?" So he didn't know. General Smith said, "I want 2-a-day briefings. I want to know what's going on." Colonel Gray said, "I will handle the briefings. You go do the mission." And he did. General Smith was gracious enough to stay out of it, and we began the evacuation. Colonel Wood divided his team into 3 pieces. He had the evacuation team, the POW team, and the cache team. How would you like to have been on the cache team? Your job is to destroy millions and millions and millions of dollars, which, by the way, money doesn't burn well. Never knew that until this. Each team was put together with members, most of them with special operations background. They were comfortable with this highly fluid, high-speed, high-risk environment, and all 3 teams operated pretty much the same. And I'll talk a little bit about each, but you just take one and realize the others followed sort of the same rules. The evacuation team had to go out and they had to select the departure points. They had to control the terrain for the sites that they'd picked. They had to select the evacuees, and that means they had to make sure that they were qualified to get on. Who are you? How do I know you really are who you say you are? And then I had to prioritize them, because if you can move 3,000 and halfway into it, you're only going to move 1,500. You want to make sure your 1,500 highest priority made it out. So they had to do that. They also had to ensure the safety ashore and afloat. Weren't enough men where he could subdivide those tasks. That whole team had to get up and go look at evacuation points, which basically took an aviator-centric kind of mind to do that, to pick them up. And for those that were going to defend it, that was a kind of an infantry thing. So the teams just fluidly operated. Now, as I'm going through all this, I want you to get where I'm going to take you at the end of it, and that is, how was this dynamic evacuation of a big city in Saigon a whole lot different than what you're facing in the coming months and years? I'm going to get you there, but just keep that going up here. Explicit tasks were announced, implied tasks had to be left to the lowest level. We get there to the commander's intent. This is what I need this team to do. That's all I'm going to tell you. I trust that you can make it happen. This small band of unconventional warriors was formed on the fly in a dangerous environment where lives were in the balance minute to minute. Kind of a law enforcement situation. It's just the way it unfolds so quickly in your life. Over 3,000 people were quickly found throughout the city, which is a whole nother presentation on how that worked. They were organized by priorities and they were evacuated. All done through a very loosely wrapped plan that involved, of all things, stealing. Well, they were abandoned cars in the street, and so they were taken off the street and repainted. And they were repainted to look like police cars. They were able to get a hold of enough lights to make these things, they could get in front of the bus convoys and escort them through. The national police were going back and forth. They were for the south until the north got close, and then they were for the north until things got cooled down. You just didn't know who they belonged to. They found a warehouse full of supplies, including flak jackets, and they put one team inside the buses and they lined the buses with flak jackets using duct tape and baling wire. And those were the protective armored cars that got the civilians to their departure points. They also had distracting activities, so they were out doing things that caused the NVA to stop, go research what an explosion was or what the fire was. Now, just a quick one for the next team, the POWs. This was kind of interesting. You think of, okay, all the information on the POWs. I have a list of papers, where they are, what's their name, what's their social security number. That was true, that was there. But those things had to be collected from multiple locations all over the city of Saigon. They had to be transported into various evacuation sites. And they had to be put in some kind of a sequence so that if one cell went down, you didn't lose all contact of all of the POWs, because we didn't know where they were all at. The team leader here, by the way, was a team member from the Son-Tay raid, for those of you who remember Son-Tay. There were paper files. There were big plywood models of camps. There was a little bit of everything in there. There were picture boards, raw film, and even eyewitnesses. Some of the high priority evacuees were perhaps questionable people off the street, but they had some information about our POWs. So all of that was what concurrently the POW team was working on. The cash that was stored in some locations that were not far off the main avenues of approach in the NVA. The cash team went out and they put thermite grenades into the boxes. And a thermite, you know what thermite is. Thermite started burning, lots of smoke, lots of heat, not a lot of flame, and money doesn't burn. And nobody, we're Marines, you know, you got to show us a step at a time. Nobody told us if you put bundles of cash together, it wouldn't burn. You got to stir it up. These people are in there stirring it up as bills are floating around. The North Vietnamese army on 2 of those avenues of approach rolled right over the top of the cash team. They had to go out and start other fires to hide what they were doing. And after the NVA passed through, they went back to work stoking the cash to make it burn. During the after-action report, there was some discussion, did you destroy all the money? And there were some real uncomfortable looks back and forth as they tried to explain cash doesn't burn. All this thing was done under the looming threat of the NVA that was just rolling into the city like a slow lava flow. They didn't come crashing in. It was very slow, took days to accomplish. They didn't know. I think they expected a battle, and they were trying to probe in very gently. To this day, I think you find in history, it'll reflect that the Americans evacuated under the watchful eye of the ambassador and his staff and followed a very carefully and orchestrated plan that had been in place for years and years, and that's just not true. The truth is they were facilitated, this evacuation, and that was the mission at hand. This mission was accomplished by a band of determined, capable warriors who simply had to trust each other. They had to subsume and assume command back and forth as they moved from task to task. And they had to do it not really knowing each other. You know, one is a SEAL, one is a Green Beret, one is a Marine, one from the CIA. Never saw you before. But because of some of your basic early training, I know I can trust you. And you know, I suspect history is replete with similar stories where leadership on the ground, or at sea or in the air for that matter, fell to those who had the expertise and not necessarily the title. You know, aviators have a wonderful saying, and I love to harass my aviator friends, but they do an awful lot of things exactly right. And they've got a saying. It says, kick the tires, light the fires, first man in the air's got the lead. And it kind of says it all. It's sort of the way you are. It's in that response time, who gets there first? And you may very well be that leader and may have to be the leader for 2 or 3 days until the right teams get there. When you're in a dynamic environment and dealing with immediate challenges, sudden changes, where there are no plans or no roadmaps, there's nothing precise, you alone can't be expected to be that all-knowing, all-doing expert. You have, if you were the first car on site, you have to now look for who's coming up that can handle that part of the job that you need done. Who is your EOD guy? When does he get there? How do you recognize him? The incident commander is always going to be that, and I may have some of these terms wrong. I'm not in a blue uniform, but the incident commander is always going to be that guy. He's going to be appointed. He's going to have that responsibility. He's going to be in front of the mic when the news cameras come on. And back at the department, you're always going to have the director of personnel or the director of training or whatever that is, and they'll always have their home base operations. That's a given, and we don't want to give any of that up. The chief, the sheriff, the director of the agency will always be exactly that. They're responsible for the whole agency, all the logistics and administration of getting those warriors ready. This is not about taking anything away from anybody. And again, is there anybody from the FBI here? It's not about taking anything away from the FBI, not at all. This is all about focused leadership on a specific situation. It's situational leadership in crisis. Military services have a long history of competition, and you hear it in here, banter back and forth. But in the last 30 years or so, there's become a very, very focused effort on this jointness. Everything is jointness. And having been a joint commander, I can tell you it's an absolutely wonderful thing to be able to reach out and touch the very best the Navy has, the very best the Air Force has, the Army, the Coast Guard, the FBI, and they all work for you. All that talent is right there. Joint task forces are an incredibly powerful tool. The individuals in teams bring in these capabilities, but when they arrive to you, all of their admin and logistics or training is done. It's complete. You have no responsibilities for that. You only have to employ that capability and those talents in whatever your task is. In a small operations business, this is normal life. It's just normal life. A lot of questions, and not much discussed, and that's good, but a lot of questions come up in special operations that, wow, you know, the Army had a colonel there and the Marines had a lieutenant there, and the lieutenant was in charge. No, he was in charge for what he did best. just for what he did best. The colonel may have been the EOD colonel for the entire Army. He may have been the best expert in the entire Army. That's the way those teams are put together. They don't look at what they're wearing on the collar. It's all about the talent. Okay, so General Krulak, who was the commandant of the Marine Corps, when he took office in the 90s, early 90s, and he declared a notion of the 3-block war. Anybody hear that? The 3-block war. It would do all law enforcement well to read about the 3-block war, because now you're the guys. You're the guys. It used to be the military off in some country doing this. It's now you. Most recently, they're throwing in a 4th block, which is the whole geek dynamic of this. Everything that goes on with the internet and so on. This is your environment, so I'm going to talk just a second about it. The 3 block, it doesn't mean 3 city blocks. I always like to think it meant that, but that isn't what it means. There are 3 blocks. What do I have to be prepared to do when I go over the horizon? I need to be prepared for full-scale military operations, a shootout, full-scale shootout. Is there anybody in this room right now that thinks that you have no chance of being in a full-scale shootout in the next 5 years? Room full of smart people. You are. You're right square in the middle of the battlefield. The 2nd block is peacekeeping. You've got the shooting stopped. Now what do you do? It's not just about walking around with a rifle and keeping people from shooting each other. You've got to get around, find engineers, get the lights turned on, get business going again, protect the prosecutor in the court so he can run. All of those are things that you may be faced with as well. And then the 3rd thing is humanitarian aid. Now imagine you're in an environment where you go through those 3 blocks in a matter of 1 week. Full-scale shootout and everything that entails. And you know the details of that. Maintain the peace. And then you start looking around and finding families that are trying to find loved ones, kids in the street. Humanitarian effort is tough, tough work. And the patrolman, with 2 years on the job that you send out there, has got to be able to do all 3 of those. He's got to function in all 3 of those. It's not just you who come here with 20 or 25 years or 30 years of experience. It's these young guys, young women that are in there with a year or 2. They may be the first one out on that site, and they may be cut off. Think about that. Geographically or by enemy action, they could be cut off and in charge of their sector. A 2-year patrolman taking charge out there. All of you probably could have done it, and I suspect the ones that are here now can do it. But these 3 blocks, or 4 blocks, will occur geographically and chronologically pretty close together. That's a lot to take in. That's a lot to train for. Think how this applies to your world. The crux of this is that leadership at the lowest levels of the organization have to be at the highest level possible day 1 of the operation. The crux of this is that the training for the lowest level, 2-year patrolman, 1-year patrolman, has to be at the highest possible level on day 1 of the war. Keep that one in mind. Training's a must. We just have to do it. This situational leadership, this team leadership, trust me, it's a direction that we have to go. So how do we do this thing? How do we take these patrolmen, or deputies, or detectives, or whatever they are, and we throw them into this position of being on an A-team leader or part of a smaller team, where we've got them on the front lines. We're asking them to take independent actions and make major decisions out there on the street that'll ensure the overall success of the operation. And think about those things when you got a 2-year patrolman out there. He's going to be on the other side of the river where you might not be able to get to him right away. He's got to know that he can make decisions. You're going to be behind him. You've got to know that he'll make the right decisions. I think that the very basis for all this training, and I think perhaps one of the reasons that you all are as active as you are in your departments doing what you do, I think that the very basis for all of this training has to be to ensure that that decision maker is founded in solid ethics. So all this warrior training starts in ethics? I think so. I think so. The right decision will always, always be right. It may not be the best one because your wisdom could bring a little extra to that 2-year patrolman, but the right decision will always be right. So let's start there. Let's start this training with the ethics training and then ethics mentoring as it goes on. Marine Corps did an interesting experiment under General Krulak a long time ago. General Krulak decided that he wanted to look at different people and how they made decisions. And he went to law enforcement as one. He went to a number of places. But he went to Wall Street. And he said, I want to put a group of my officers on the floor with your traders. And we're going to watch how you do these instant trades, millions and millions of dollars going back and forth. How do you ensure success? What's your calculus that you do mentally to ensure that? Those officers spent a day on the floor and came back with their heads spinning. They said it's just incredible the amount of work that these people do on their feet. It's all math. It's based on a lot of research. And they told all the reasons and how they did it. And it was pretty impressive. It was very impressive. The calculus was enlightening. The ethics were absent. They're absent. Nobody in that whole town, or that whole time on the floor, said anything about the ethics of a trade. Will the company die and all the people will fail and the town will close? Don't know, don't care. I can make $1 million. That was one of the things General Krulak took out of that, is the importance of ethics. He did offer to a number of these organizations to come back, and he took the brokers, each who had sponsored a Marine in a company or taking him around the floor that day. He took them back and put them in the field, essentially put them in a car as a ride-along. He put them in the field. There were actors, aggressive actors, passive actors, everybody had their role. And the brokers were, I don't know if you've done this, if you've done this kind of training. I would assume that you have. You've got actors in civilian clothes and they're misbehaving and they're doing whatever. And so when these people went out there, they went with a bit of a uniform on, a little helmet or something that said they were in charge. And they had to make decisions. They had to make instant decisions, and they were good at this. Remember, these are the people, millions of dollars, are able to do all this math in their head. They've got it down. They're making this thing happen. They put them into that situation, and their decision was shoot or don't shoot. Most cases, you shoot or die. And the majority of them died because they just wanted a little bit more information. Just about the distance of a trigger pull, too late. They had to make decisions on whether they'd trade prisoners or not. So they were given a situation. You've got some guy here, he's pleading not to be sent back. They're saying, send him back, we'll give you your guy. 100% they traded. 100%. They had another situation where they had the question was, do you permit local customs to prevail? And it was a Muslim setting, and they were about to stone a young girl, and she's pleading for her life, and the brokers unanimously let them stone her. One of the brokers, by the end of the afternoon, when the thing fell apart, one of the brokers broke down crying, and one got so sick he vomited. That's hard stuff. You do that every day. That's your world. That 1 or 2 year patrolman may not have seen all of that. But that's the kind of training we've got to get these people into. They've got to be well-based in ethics, then they've got to be put in these very, very difficult situations and think through the ethics that have to go through your brain in a second. Then we have to take that training that's conducted in your police department, your sheriff's department, and it has to be now conducted in a regional setting. It has to be conducted in a national setting. It has to be included with the FBI. We've got to get these groups so that we use common terms and common frequencies and all that sort of stuff. Second piece of this, and I'm getting close. The second piece of this is that each of us have our own leadership style. It's based on our experiences, our training, our personality, and we've all figured out how to make that thing work. You know, if we're a strict authoritative leader, we can kind of bend that a little bit to make it work. But let me take you back to the 3-block war. You know, the authoritative guy is going to do pretty well in that all-out war where it's shooting, banging, going on minute to minute. Next step may be more difficult because now you're trying to bring in some of the population to help you in the peacekeeping piece. And when you get to humanitarian aid, mothers and crying kids, the authoritarian guy probably isn't going to do so well there. So we need to teach the styles, and we need to let people know it's okay to change your style. Adapt that style to the situation. Not everybody sees it that way, and you know who I mean. There are some folks out there who see the world as a nail and they are a hammer, and they've got one mission. And they may be good at their trade, but they need to become more valuable in the joint world. They need to not see the world as that nail that they're going to go pound into the wood. Okay, I understand that all that training takes resources. The officer that's going to go into those training cells for days or weeks has got to be replaced on the street, so maybe that ups your requirement for a half an officer or 2 officers or 10 officers on your department. That's money. All of the scenarios, the mock-ups all need to be designed and developed and built. Their instructors, evaluators, coordinators, managers, all the people that run these things, that all has to be done. I understand those limitations. And I think there's an answer for it. You know, if your departments, if you regionally or by state or by larger region went to any body of Congress or a state legislature and said we need $20 million to accomplish this training, they would probably say it's $20 million we don't have. I would think that we'd look at this thing in a different view. I would juxtapose those resource claims against opportunity cost lost. In other words, what's the cost of peace? And it's not just dollars. It's lives. Some yours that you so willingly offer on a daily basis, but a lot of people on the street who don't even think about it, that without the right training, they are at risk. And that's the way we have to do it. We have to identify the opportunity cost lost, which is the cost of peace in the streets. I think we have to ask for these joint solutions, and I think we have to ask for capability sharing across the nation. And I think we should ask for a national law enforcement grant that would establish regional programs all over the country, but under some kind of an agreement. Excuse me, not the national. We don't want a national program run out of Washington, D.C. Really don't need that. But we need programs that fit your region, that fit your terrain, that fit your people, but overall fit into the plan nationally. Peter Drucker, who's a consultant and an author, writes about organizational development, organizations, and management, has described the difference between management and leadership as being management is doing things right. And we need that. We need training done right. We need all this stuff. We need that done right. Leadership is doing the right things. And I would add on to Dr. Drucker's comment that the right things start from the heart out with good ethics. I had a personal experience. I'll share it with you. And I heard earlier there was not a prosecutor in the room. Shame. I was in a courtroom, and the judge asked a question, and the response to the question was, the judge asked, "Why did you do that?" And the response to the question was, "It was the right thing to do." The judge took his gavel, slammed it down, and in an angry tone said, "The right thing has no place in a court of law." I had to sit back and scratch my head, and I think the look on my face caused the judge some pause, because I know he was wishing he could reel that back, but it was part of the court record. Here's a judge sitting on the bench, and he's been sitting there for a long time. He's probably going to be there a lot longer, who doesn't understand the value of the right thing. Black and white in his courtroom. It's got to be preset. There's a book there. There's a book. Option 1, option 2, A, B. And that's not the real world. So there's a lot of education that has to go on, not just for you who are the frontline warriors, but with the prosecutors and the judges who support you in the long haul. Listen, this nation right now, absolutely, you're in the middle of it. You're probably too busy to get out and see a whole lot and talk a whole lot, but this nation, in every farmhouse, on every city block, at every truck stop, at every RV camp, this nation yearns for peace in the streets, ethical leadership, and honesty. It's what the nation yearns for. We're a nation of good people, and we're looking for that kind of goodness to come in. People look for peace in the streets. They look for leadership, and they look for honesty. And unfortunately, the first place they look is to a badge. They look to you. And I'm okay with that, but I think we as a nation have to get bigger than that. We have to support you so that we can become broader than that. Our future as a nation, I think, depends on the virtues of honor, courage, and commitment. I was asked by a sheriff, recently a senior guy, where the military sees law enforcement. And I told him, standing shoulder to shoulder with the active duty military, just oriented on a different battle. We're all in the same war. We're oriented on different battles. I would like to take just a 30-second clip here and thank my local law enforcement, Elkhart Police and Elkhart County. I had an event today that I had to handle, unpleasant, had to be done. And as it was taking place, I saw the patrol cars cruising a block or two away. And it made me feel very, very safe. And to all of Elkhart, all of you, as a matter of fact, no matter where we are, we feel safe because of the work that you do. And so I salute each and every one of you. I thank you for everything that you do and what your families give up to let you do it. You are the heroes of this war, and the nation is with you. God bless.